The last normal moment I can point to, the very last one before everything changed, was me losing an argument with a helium tank at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I want to be clear, I am a forensic accountant. I find fraud for a living. I have sat across from corporate executives who lied to my face with a smile and caught every single one of them. I have untangled financial records so deliberately complicated they looked like someone had put a spreadsheet through a blender. I am not, by any definition of the word, someone who loses. The helium tank did not care about any of that. It just sat there on the deck of the lake house we had rented for the day, squat and silver and completely indifferent to my professional reputation, refusing to cooperate no matter what I did. The balloons kept coming out half inflated, drooping sadly to one side like they had given up on life. Which, at 9 in the morning, 32 weeks pregnant, standing in the September heat of Nashville, Tennessee, I understood completely. My best friend Lily showed up behind me, took one look at the situation, and said nothing. That is one of Lily's greatest qualities. She knows when words will not help. She simply reached past me, adjusted something on the valve I had clearly been doing wrong, and the tank began working immediately. She walked away without a word. I chose not to acknowledge what had just happened. We had rented the lake house for the day, a beautiful 2-story property right on the edge of Percy Priest Lake, about 20 minutes outside of downtown Nashville. It had a wide wraparound deck that looked out over the water, string lights that Lily had arrived at 7 in the morning to hang, and a kitchen big enough to hold the approximately 9,000 pounds of food that people had somehow agreed to bring. It was not the venue I had originally imagined for my baby shower. I had imagined something smaller, quieter, easier to clean. Lily had imagined something she could organize like a military operation, and Lily's imagination tends to win. She is Puerto Rican, 5'3", and when she commits to an event, she commits the way generals commit to campaigns. She had a color-coded supply list, she had backup tablecloths, she had a printed timeline for the morning, broken into 15-minute increments, which she had laminated. I am not joking about the laminating. My husband Marcus was there too, doing his best. Marcus is a structural engineer for the Tennessee Department of Transportation, which means he is exceptionally good at understanding how large things are supposed to be built, and completely hopeless when it comes to building small things himself. He had been assigned one task: assemble the gift table. It took him 3 attempts and 40 minutes. The final result wobbled every time someone walked past it. I watched him look at it with the expression of a man who wanted to explain why it was technically fine. I did not give him the opportunity. I should tell you a little about myself, since I am the one telling this story. My name is Claire Donovan. I am 32 years old. I have been a forensic accountant for 8 years, currently a senior investigator at a mid-sized firm in downtown Nashville. I have been married to Marcus for 3 years. And at 32 weeks pregnant with our daughter, the biggest problem in my life that morning, the thing keeping me up at night, the thing I had been grinding my teeth over for 2 weeks, was that my firm's HR department had been calculating my maternity leave benefits using my salary from 2 years ago instead of my current one. The difference was $312 per paycheck, paid bi-weekly. Every time I emailed HR about it, I received a variation of the same response: "We are reviewing it." They had been reviewing it for 14 days. I had the patience of someone who reconciles balance sheets for a living, which is to say, very little, and only when I choose to apply it. I checked my phone that morning at 9:45, another non-answer from HR. I put the phone face down on the gift table, the wobbling one, and told myself, not today. Today was about the baby. By 11 o'clock, the guests had started arriving. Marcus's mother, Patricia, was first because Patricia is always first. She is 61 years old, a retired high school administrator who drives a champagne-colored Buick Enclave that she keeps so immaculate you could perform surgery on the dashboard. She walked in, took a long look at the string lights and the balloon arch Lily had constructed over the entrance, and said, "Oh, this is lovely. Very modern." If you have spent any time around Patricia, you know that lovely is what she says when she means perfectly acceptable. She hugged me one of those side hugs where her hand pats your shoulder blade like she is gently correcting your posture, and then leaned close and said, quietly, "You know, once the baby arrives, you might want to reconsider the travel demands of your position." I have a specific smile I use for Patricia comments. It takes 4 muscles and connects to nothing resembling joy. I used it then. I do love my mother-in-law. I want to say that clearly. She raised Marcus, and Marcus is the best man I have ever known. But Patricia has a way of making observations that are technically about one thing and actually about something else entirely. And after 3 years, I have developed a very precise internal translator for them. By 11:30, 47 people had arrived. Co-workers, neighbors, cousins, friends from the running group I had stopped running with at 28 weeks because my ankles had developed opinions of their own. There was a fruit arrangement so large it had its own gravitational field. Someone had brought a diaper raffle prize wrapped in approximately 4 miles of ribbon. Lily was running the whole thing like air traffic control, managing people and plates and games with the focused efficiency of someone who had laminated a timeline and intended to stick to it. Marcus had slipped outside onto the lower deck with his friend Tom, which is what husbands do at baby showers when they have finished their assigned tasks and do not want to be assigned more. Everything was perfect. I remember thinking those exact words, standing at the edge of the deck with a glass of sparkling water in my hand, looking out at Percy Priest Lake, catching the September light. Everything is perfect. I have since learned to be more careful about thinking things like that. It was 11:47 when I had that thought. By 12:15, 47 people would be staring at me like I was the one who did not belong there. But I did not know that yet. I was still watching the lake, still holding my water, still thinking about everything being perfect. And then Lily called out that the games would start at 12:30, and I looked at my phone to check the time, and I put it back in my pocket, and I went inside to get ready. She didn't knock. People who are about to blow up your life rarely do. It was 12:15 when the front door of the lake house opened. I know the exact time because Lily had just announced in the cheerful but non-negotiable tone she uses when she has a laminated timeline to protect that the games would begin at 12:30. I had glanced at my phone. 12:15. I had put it back in my pocket. And then the door opened. Nobody recognized her. I could tell by the way the room shifted, not dramatically, not all at once, but in that particular way a crowd shifts when someone unfamiliar walks into a space that was supposed to be for familiar people only. A few heads turned. A few conversations trailed off, and then most people looked away and went back to their plates, because sometimes a stranger is just a stranger who wandered into the wrong event. She was not a stranger who had wandered into the wrong event. She was maybe 27, 28. Dark hair pulled back from her face. She was wearing a white sundress, the kind with thin straps and a flowy skirt, and it was stretched tight across a pregnant belly that looked to be about as far along as mine. She stood in the doorway for a moment, just a moment, and she scanned the room with the focused, deliberate look of someone searching for a specific person. Not browsing, searching. She found him. Marcus had come back inside a few minutes earlier to refill his drink. He was standing near the kitchen counter, cup in hand, saying something to Patricia about the Titans' offensive line, which is the kind of conversation Marcus has whenever he needs to fill space with words that do not require much thought. He did not see her coming. He had no reason to look up. She walked past the gift table, the wobbling one. She walked past the balloon arch. She walked past Lily, who was holding a clipboard, and whose eyes narrowed approximately 1/4 of a second after the woman passed her, because Lily notices everything and files it immediately. She walked past me. She stopped in front of Marcus, and she put her hand on his arm. "Honey," she said. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Not loud, not dramatic, just that one word, in a completely ordinary tone. The way you say it to someone you have said it to 1,000 times before. Marcus looked at her hand on his arm, the way you look at something that your brain cannot immediately classify. His face did not go angry. It did not go guilty. It went blank, the specific kind of blank that is not calm at all, that is actually a system trying to reboot after receiving information it has no file for. He said, "I'm sorry, do I?" She did not let him finish. She turned to face the room. She turned to face all 47 of us, and she said it. "I think there's been something going on that people here deserve to know about." Her voice was steady, controlled, like she had rehearsed it, or like she had told herself she would be steady and was holding on to that decision with everything she had. My name is Sabrina, and this man, she did not look at Marcus when she said it. She kept her eyes on the room, has been in a relationship with me for the past 6 months. I'm carrying his child. I have tried many times since that afternoon to find the right word for what happened to the air in that room. The closest I can get is, it stopped. Not dramatically, not with gasps or shouts. It just stopped. Like someone had pressed pause on every conversation, every laugh, every clink of a fork against a plate. 47 people, and not one of them was breathing. Sabrina pulled out her phone. She started scrolling. She turned the screen outward so the room could see. Photos. Her and a man who very much looked like Marcus, at a restaurant downtown, at Centennial Park, a selfie somewhere with good lighting and both of them smiling. She knew the name of his direct supervisor at the Tennessee DOT. She knew he drove a gray Chevrolet Colorado. She knew he took his coffee black with 1 sugar, which is a detail so specific and so correct that I felt it land somewhere in my chest, like a small, cold stone. She had a thin gold ring on her left hand. I looked at Marcus. His mouth was open slightly. He was looking at the photos with the expression of a man seeing something that both does and does not make sense at the same time, like a financial report, where the columns almost add up but one number is wrong, and you cannot immediately find which one. And then I looked at Patricia. I have thought about this moment more than almost any other moment of that entire day, more than the confrontation, more than what came after, because Patricia is not a woman who shows uncertainty. She is a woman who classifies things lovely or interesting, acceptable or not, and she does it quickly and she does it with confidence. In 61 years, I do not think I have ever seen her look unsure of anything. But for 3 seconds, I counted them. Because I count things, it is what I do for exactly 3 seconds. Patricia looked at her son with a question in her eyes. Not an accusation, a question. The smallest, most fleeting crack of doubt, there and then gone, smoothed back over by the time Marcus looked her way. 3 seconds. That was what broke me. Not the woman in the white dress, not the photos, not the ring. The fact that his own mother for 3 seconds had wondered. I felt Lily move beside me. I put my hand on her arm before she could step forward, because something underneath the shock, underneath the noise in my head, and the fact that my daughter had chosen this exact moment to deliver what I can only describe as a commentary, kicked directly to my ribs, something in me went very, very still. The particular stillness I get when a set of numbers is wrong and I have not found the error yet. The stillness, that means do not move, do not react, find the thing that does not add up. I had a question, just one. I want to be honest with you about what was happening inside my head at that moment because I think people assume that when someone does something calm under pressure, it means they were not scared. That is not how it works, at least not for me. I was terrified. My hands had gone cold. My ears had that particular ringing quality that shows up when your blood pressure is doing things your doctor would not approve of. My daughter was still making her opinions known from the inside. And underneath all of that, underneath the fear and the noise and the 47 people standing in complete silence waiting to see what I would do, there was something else. Something quieter and much more focused. I have been a forensic accountant for 8 years. In that time, I have learned one thing above all others. When something looks wrong, you do not react to how it looks. You find the number that does not belong. You find the one detail that the whole false structure depends on, and then you pull it. I took my hand off Lily's arm, I took a breath, and I walked toward Sabrina. The room stayed silent. I could feel 47 people holding themselves very still, the way you hold still when you are not sure if the thing in front of you is going to explode. Sabrina watched me come. She lifted her chin slightly, the posture of someone who had prepared for this, who had told herself she was ready for whatever response came, and she waited. I stopped about 4 feet away from her, close enough to speak without raising my voice, far enough to give us both room. I'm only going to ask you one thing, I said. Just one question, and I'd like you to answer it honestly. She looked at me steadily. Go ahead. I want you to understand what I was doing in the 2 seconds before I asked. I was not being brave. I was not performing calm for the benefit of the room. I was running a very fast, very specific calculation. Because here is the thing about someone who builds a false identity around a real person. They do their research. They get the obvious things right. The name, the job, the car, the coffee order. Those are the things you can find. Those are the surface details that make a lie feel like truth. But there are things you cannot find. Things that live only in the same physical space as a person. Things you only know if you have actually stood in a room with them, seen them in a t-shirt on a Sunday morning, watched them reach for something on a high shelf. Marcus Donovan does not have a single tattoo on his body. Not one. I know this the way I know my own name. I know this from 3 years of marriage, from every beach trip and every lazy Sunday and every time he has rolled up his sleeves to wash dishes. His arms are completely clear, both of them. My husband has a tattoo, I said. Can you describe it for me? Location, design, everything you remember. Something moved across Sabrina's face. Just a flicker, there and gone, so fast that if I had not been watching for exactly that kind of micro-expression, I might have missed it. But I was watching. I always watch. She recovered quickly. His left shoulder, she said. It's an eagle. He got it in college. I turned to Marcus. He was already looking at me, and I think he understood in that moment exactly what I needed him to do. Because Marcus, for all his difficulty with assembling furniture and his habit of hiding on the deck during social events, has always been very good at the moments that actually matter. He set his cup down on the counter behind him. He reached up with both hands. He pulled the collar of his shirt aside and rolled up both sleeves to the elbow in one smooth motion. 2 arms. No ink. Not a mark anywhere. The room did not gasp. It was more like the room exhaled this long collective release of held breath, a shift in atmospheric pressure that you could actually feel. I heard someone put a plate down on the table behind me. I heard Lily, very quietly, say something under her breath in Spanish that I did not catch, but that I completely understood the spirit of. I watched Sabrina look at Marcus's arms. I watched her look at the photos on her phone. I watched her look back at Marcus. And I watched the color leave her face. Not gradually, not in stages all at once, like someone had reached behind her and turned off a light. Her mouth opened slightly. Her hand, the one holding the phone, dropped a few inches. And the confidence she had walked in with, the careful steadiness she had been holding onto like a railing on a steep staircase, I watched it go. She was not performing. That was the thing I noticed first, and that I have thought about many times since. When a person is caught in a deliberate lie, there is usually a beat of recalculation, a moment where they decide whether to double down or retreat. I have seen it hundreds of times across conference tables. I know what it looks like. This was not that. What crossed Sabrina's face was not the expression of a liar being exposed. It was the expression of someone who was only now understanding that they had been the lie. That the thing they had believed in, the thing they had built 6 months of their life around, had been constructed out of someone else's cruelty and their own desperate willingness to believe it was real. She started, then stopped, swallowed. Someone told me. Someone said. She stopped again. Not he told me. Not Marcus told me. Someone. She looked at the room one more time, not with defiance now, just with the particular blankness of a person whose script has just stopped making sense, and then she turned, and she walked back toward the door, and she left. The door closed behind her. I stood in the middle of my own baby shower, and I held that word. Someone. Not him. Not the man whose name she had been using for 6 months. Someone else had told her. Someone else had built the profile, planted the photos, fed her the details, and aimed her at this room like she was a guided missile. Sabrina was not the one who had done this to me. Sabrina was what someone had done to both of us. And that word, that one small word she had not meant to leave behind, had just changed everything. Here is something nobody tells you about being publicly confronted at your own baby shower. The party does not stop. People just get quieter about having fun. The door closed behind Sabrina at 12:23. I know, because I looked at my phone immediately afterward, the way you reach for something familiar when the ground has just shifted under you. 12:23. Lily's laminated timeline had the diaper raffle scheduled for 12:45. Life apparently had its own schedule and did not care about Lily's laminated timeline at all. For about 10 seconds, nobody moved. The room held itself in that particular suspended state, 47 people collectively processing something they had not expected to be part of when they got dressed that morning and drove out to Percy Priest Lake, wrapped gift, and a willingness to play baby shower games. Then, one by one, the stillness broke. Someone picked up their plate. Someone else leaned toward the person next to them and said something in a voice too low for me to hear. A conversation started in the corner near the fruit arrangement, and then another. And then slowly, carefully, like a car easing back onto the highway after pulling over, the room began moving again. But it was different. The warmth that had been there before, the easy, comfortable warmth of 47 people who were happy to be in the same place, had changed into something more careful, more watchful. The kind of atmosphere where people are smiling, but their eyes are doing something else entirely. 4 guests left within the next 20 minutes. 2 of them hugged me on the way out, long hugs with their hands pressed firmly against my back, the kind of hug that is trying to say something the person cannot find words for. One of them whispered, "You were incredible." The third guest, a neighbor I had invited, mostly out of politeness and whose name I could not have told you without checking the guest list, just waved from across the room and slipped out the door. I noted all 3 departures. I note things. It is a habit I have never been able to turn off. Marcus found me near the kitchen. He had set his cup down somewhere and forgotten it, and he was standing in front of me with both hands slightly raised, like he was approaching something that might startle. "Claire," he said, "I swear to you, I have never seen that woman before in my life." I looked at him. I looked at his face, the face I have looked at across the breakfast table and across the seats of a car on long drives and across the pillow at 2 a.m. when one of us cannot sleep, and I believed him. Not because I am naive, and not because I needed to believe him for my own comfort, but because I know how to read a face, and his face was telling me the truth. But here is something I have come to understand in the hours and days and weeks since that afternoon. Believing your husband and watching a room full of people not be entirely sure they believe him are 2 completely different experiences, and they do not cancel each other out. They exist at the same time. They sit next to each other in your chest, and they do not get along. "I know," I said. He looked at me for a moment. "That's it, you know?" "Marcus," I said, "I know. But right now, I need you to go make sure the gift table is not wobbling, because if it falls over and takes the diaper raffle basket with it, Lily will never forgive either of us." He went. It was still wobbling. He stood next to it for the rest of the afternoon, with his hand on the edge, which was not exactly what I had meant, but which I chose to find endearing. Lily appeared at my elbow approximately 45 seconds after Marcus walked away. She did not say anything immediately. She just stood beside me and looked at the room and breathed. Then she said, "I spent 6 hours this morning on this event. 6 hours. And that woman walked in here in a white dress and tried to make it about her." She paused. "The balloon arch alone took me 2.5 hours. "I know," I said. "I used a level," she said, "on balloon placement." "I know you did." She was quiet for another moment. Then she put her arm around me, carefully, around my shoulders, and she squeezed once. That was all. It was enough. We finished the shower, we played the games, someone won the diaper raffle and seemed genuinely delighted by it, which I appreciated more than I could say. People ate and laughed and admired the gift table, the stabilized, Marcus-guarded gift table, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, if you had walked into that lake house not knowing what had happened at 12:15, you might not have been able to tell. You might just have seen a baby shower winding down pleasantly in the September light off Percy Priest Lake. But I could tell. I could feel the difference in the room the way you feel. A structural flaw not always visible on the surface, but present underneath everything. We drove home at 3:30. Marcus carried the gifts in from the car in 3 trips while I sat on the couch with my shoes off and my feet elevated, which my doctor had told me to do more and which I had been doing less. The house was quiet. The good kind of quiet, usually. Not that afternoon. Marcus sat down next to me when he was done and put his hand over mine and did not say anything, which was exactly right. I held it together until he went to make dinner. Then I sat alone on that couch for 11 minutes and I cried. Not the dramatic, heaving kind of crying that makes for good television. Just quiet, tired, relentless tears, the kind that come when you have been holding something very tightly for several hours and you finally put it down. 11 minutes. Then I washed my face at the kitchen sink, dried it on the dish towel, and went to help with dinner like nothing had happened. Because the word was still there, sitting in the back of my mind like a line item that refused to be reconciled. Someone. And whoever that someone was, I was fairly certain they were not done. Neither was I. The thing about living in a mid-sized city like Nashville is that it is large enough that strangers pass each other on the street every day without recognition, but small enough that a story, the right kind of story, the kind with a pregnant woman and a confrontation and 47 witnesses, can travel from a lake house on Percy Priest all the way to your office break room in approximately 60 hours. I know this because on Monday morning, at 8:52, my colleague Jenny Ashworth appeared in the doorway of the break room while I was making tea and said, with the careful, softened expression of someone delivering a casserole to a bereaved family, "Hey, I just want you to know that whatever people are saying, I'm not saying it." I looked at her over my mug. "What are people saying, Jenny?" She hesitated. "I probably shouldn't." "Jenny," she told me. The version of Saturday's events that had made its way through the corridors of our firm and apparently through at least 2 other firms downtown. Because Nashville's professional network is approximately the size of a large high school, bore a loose resemblance to what had actually happened, the way a rumor always does. The broad shape was there, but the details had been upgraded for dramatic effect. In the version circulating through my office, Marcus did not merely have a woman show up claiming a relationship. Marcus had, according to the story Jenny had heard from a paralegal, who had heard it from someone's husband, who had apparently been at a separate event where one of my shower guests had been talking, an entire secret second family. In Wilson County, with older children, plural. Gossip is creative that way. It takes what it is given and it improves upon it. It adds children that do not exist, and counties that were never mentioned, and levels of betrayal that are more satisfying than the truth, because they are tidier. The truth is always messier and more complicated than gossip wants it to be. I thanked Jenny for telling me. I took my tea back to my desk. I opened the audit file I had been working on before any of this happened. A straightforward revenue recognition issue for a medical supply company, the kind of clean, solvable problem I was beginning to miss deeply, and I stared at it for 4 minutes without reading a single word. Then I closed it, opened a new document, and started writing down everything I remembered about Saturday, every detail in order, as precisely as I could recall it. The forensic accountant's first instinct: document everything before the memory gets contaminated by everything that comes after. Tuesday brought my neighbor Carol Hendricks to my front door at 6:15 in the evening, holding a loaf of banana bread wrapped in plastic and wearing the expression of a woman who is concerned about you but also extremely curious about your situation. Carol is 63, retired, and has lived across the street from us for 4 years. She is the kind of neighbor who notices everything when packages are delivered, when cars are parked in unusual places, when someone's lights are on at 3 in the morning, and files it all away with the dedication of a very committed amateur archivist. "I just wanted to check in," she said, holding the banana bread out toward me. "Make sure everything is okay at home." She used the voice. I think most people know the voice I am talking about. The one that says I am worried about you but means I am here for information, and possibly also banana bread. I told her everything was fine. I thanked her for the bread. I closed the door. The banana bread was actually very good, which felt like an insult. Wednesday, my cousin Beth called. 40 seconds of "how are you feeling, and how is the baby," and then, "so I heard there was some kind of scene at your shower." Beth is the kind of person who describes herself as someone who hates drama while moving toward it at a determined sprint. I gave her the shortest version I could manage, which was still too much because Beth does not need much to work with. She can extrapolate from a sentence the way some people extrapolate from a spreadsheet. Wednesday evening was when the neighborhood Facebook group became a problem. Someone no name, no profile picture, the particular courage of complete anonymity had posted in the group, which had 431 members and covered the 12-block radius around our house. "Does anyone know what's going on with the family on Creekside Drive? Heard something concerning and wondering if others have too." Lily screenshotted it and sent it to me with a message that was simply 4 flame emojis and the word "no" in capital letters. The post had 14 comments before the group administrator took it down. I did not read the comments. Lily read them and told me not to ask, which told me everything I needed to know about what they said. People I saw at the mailbox. People I waved to from the car. People who had nodded at Marcus across the lawn when he mowed on Sunday mornings, all of them, apparently, with opinions about my marriage and the willingness to express those opinions in a neighborhood Facebook group at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night. I closed the app. I made myself another cup of tea. I went to bed. And through all of it, through Jenny and Carol and Beth and the Facebook group and the 14 comments I had not read but could imagine through all of it, Patricia said nothing. She called on Thursday morning. She asked how I was feeling. She asked whether I had been keeping my feet elevated the way the doctor recommended. She asked if Marcus had finished assembling the crib, which he had not. She did not mention Saturday. She did not mention Sabrina. She did not mention the fact that she had stood in a room full of people and looked at her son with a question in her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. She spoke for 11 minutes and 30 seconds. I know because I was watching the call timer on my phone screen. The way you watch something, you cannot stop but cannot look away from either. When we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and I thought about silence, about how it has weight, about how someone saying nothing can press on your chest just as heavily as someone saying the wrong thing, sometimes more. Patricia's silence was not nothing. It was a choice, and I did not know yet what it meant. What I knew was this: somewhere out there, someone had stood behind Sabrina like a puppeteer behind a curtain, had pulled the strings, had aimed her at my baby shower like a very specifically targeted disruption. And that someone was watching all of this. The whispers, the Facebook post, the banana bread and the careful voices, and the 14 comments. And they were doing nothing to stop it. Which meant they were satisfied with how it was going. That thought sat in my stomach like a stone for the rest of the day. My body made the decision before my brain did. That is the most accurate way I can describe what happened on Thursday morning. I was sitting at my desk at 9:07, working through a revenue reconciliation for a logistics company whose accounting department had apparently been run by someone with a very creative interpretation of the word consistent when the room tilted. Not dramatically, not the kind of tilt that sends you grabbing for the edge of a desk, just a quiet, subtle shift like someone had picked up the building and set it down again 1 degree off from where it had been. I sat very still for a moment. I took 3 slow breaths. The room did not correct itself. I called my doctor's office at 9:14. The nurse who answered, listened to me describe what I was experiencing, asked me 4 questions in rapid succession, and then said, in the particular tone that medical professionals use when they want you to move quickly, without panicking you into moving too quickly, "We'd like you to come in right now, Mrs. Donovan. Not urgently, just now." I have been a forensic accountant long enough to know that when someone tells you something is not urgent in that tone of voice, it is at least a little urgent. I closed my laptop, picked up my bag, and texted Marcus from the elevator. He met me at Vanderbilt Medical Center 22 minutes later, still in his work clothes, with a coffee he had forgotten to put a lid on that had spilled across the front of his jacket somewhere on the drive over. He did not mention the coffee. I did not mention it either. We have an understanding about the things that do not need to be mentioned. They put me in a monitoring room and attached what felt like approximately 900 small sensors to various parts of me and told me to lie still and breathe normally, which is the kind of instruction that immediately makes breathing normally feel like the most complicated task you have ever attempted. The monitor beside the bed drew its slow, steady lines across the screen, tracking my daughter's heartbeat in a rhythm that was, according to every nurse who checked it, perfectly fine. Strong and steady and completely unbothered by the fact that her mother was lying in a hospital bed on a Thursday morning instead of being at her desk. My numbers were a different story. Dr. Reeves came in at 11:30. She is my obstetrician, and she has the particular manner of a woman who has delivered somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 babies and has therefore seen everything and is impressed by none of it. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm, pumped it up, watched the dial with the focused attention of someone reading a very important document, and then looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Your daughter is doing beautifully," she said. "You are doing less beautifully." She told me my numbers were elevated. Not in the range that required immediate intervention, but well outside the range she wanted to see at 32 weeks. She used the word concerning with the precise, measured delivery of someone who has chosen that word very carefully from a longer list of possible words. She told me I needed to reduce my stress levels. She told me this as though it were a simple logistical adjustment, like rearranging a meeting or choosing a different route to work. "Is there a pamphlet?" I asked. She looked at me for a moment. There is not a pamphlet. I feel like there should be a pamphlet. She did not find this funny, or if she did, she kept it entirely to herself, which I respect. Marcus squeezed my hand from the chair beside the bed. I squeezed back. He had cleaned the coffee off his jacket with a paper towel at some point, which had not helped. They kept me on the monitor for 3 hours. 3 hours of lying on a narrow hospital bed, watching a screen draw mountains out of my daughter's heartbeat, with nothing to do but think. I am not someone who is comfortable with nothing to do but think. I am someone who processes by moving through a problem methodically, by finding the thread that does not belong and following it to its end. Thinking without doing is just spinning. And I'd been spinning for 5 days. So I lay there, and I let myself spin, and I went back over everything. The baby shower. Sabrina walking in. The 47 people. The photos on her phone. The ring she was wearing. The things she knew about Marcus, his supervisor's name, his truck, his coffee order, and then the question, and then Marcus's arms, and then the color leaving her face, and then the word. I had been turning that word over in my mind for 5 days, like a coin I could not identify, examining it from different angles, holding it up to the light, trying to find the mint mark that would tell me where it came from. Someone told me. I was staring at the ceiling of the monitoring room, listening to the steady beep of my daughter's heartbeat when it landed. Not gradually. All at once, the way the correct answer always arrives when you have been working a problem long enough, sudden and obvious, and making everything rearrange itself around it. She had not said he told me. She had not said Marcus told me, or the man I was seeing told me, or anyone else with a direct connection to the events of that baby shower. She had said someone. A person without a name. A person she had not identified. A person who existed separately from Marcus, separately from the fake profile, separately from the photos and the coffee order, and all the carefully researched surface details. There was a third party. There had always been a third party. Someone who had built the profile, yes, but also someone who had known about the baby shower specifically. Someone who had known the date, the location, the time. Someone who had taken all the pieces they had constructed and then pointed Sabrina at exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. Sabrina had not found the shower on her own. Someone had sent her there. I sat up on the hospital bed so quickly that the monitor beside me shifted and the nurse appeared in the doorway within 4 seconds, hand on the frame, eyebrows raised. "I'm fine," I told her. "I just figured something out." She looked at me with the expression of a woman who had heard many things from many patients in many monitoring rooms and was reserving judgment on all of them. She checked the screen, made a note on her tablet, and retreated without comment. I picked up my phone from the blanket beside me. Marcus was dozing in the chair to my left, his chin dropped toward his chest, the cleaned coffee stain still faintly visible on his jacket. I looked at him for a moment. Then I opened my contacts and I found Lily's name. Because if anyone could find a ghost on the internet, it was her, and I had just figured out that we were looking for one. Lily showed up at my door at 7:30 that evening with a laptop bag over one shoulder, a grocery bag in the other hand, and the expression of someone who has been briefed on a mission and has already decided they are going to complete it regardless of the obstacles. "I brought provisions," she said, holding up the grocery bag. "Chips, sparkling water, those little cheese crackers you like, and 1 bar of dark chocolate for morale purposes. Let me in." I let her in. This is one of the things I love most about Lily. She does not ask if you need help. She identifies that you need help, she determines what form that help should take, and she arrives with provisions. In 8 years of friendship, she has never once called and said, "Is there anything I can do?" She just does it. It is the most efficient approach to caring about someone that I have ever encountered, and as a forensic accountant, I have a deep appreciation for efficiency. We set up at the kitchen table. Marcus had made dinner earlier, pasta, the one thing he makes reliably well, and then retreated to the living room with the particular sensitivity of a man who understands that some conversations are not for him. I could hear the television in the background, low enough that I could not make out what was playing. He was giving us space. I appreciated it more than I said. The first thing we needed to do was find Sabrina. I want to be upfront about something. I am a forensic accountant, not a private investigator. The differences are significant. Private investigators have licenses and databases, and the legal authority to access certain kinds of records. I had a laptop, a broadband connection, the institutional knowledge of someone who spends her professional life finding information that other people have tried to obscure, and Lily, whose skills in locating people on the internet I can only describe as a gift she did not ask for, but has fully embraced. We knew her first name. We knew she was pregnant, approximately 7 months along. We knew she lived within reasonable driving distance of Nashville, since she had driven to the lake house on a Saturday morning without it apparently being a significant undertaking. We knew she worked somewhere. She had mentioned it in passing at the shower, though in the noise and shock of that afternoon I had not caught the details clearly. And we knew her last name because my cousin Beth, who for all her enthusiasm for other people's business has the memory of a very dedicated archivist, had caught it when Sabrina introduced herself to someone near the gift table during the confrontation. Mitchell. Sabrina Mitchell. I searched Facebook first. There were more Sabrina Mitchells in the greater Nashville area than I had expected, which in retrospect should not have surprised me because Nashville is not actually as small as it sometimes feels. Lily took Instagram simultaneously. We worked through profiles methodically, the way you work through a stack of financial documents quickly, looking for the detail that matches, discarding the ones that do not. 35 minutes. That is how long it took. 35 minutes of wrong Sabrina's. A Sabrina Mitchell in Brentwood who appeared to be approximately 60 years old, a Sabrina Mitchell in Antioch whose most recent post was about her cat's birthday, a Sabrina Mitchell who lived in Kentucky and therefore could not have driven to Percy Priest Lake on a Saturday morning without it being a significant undertaking. And then, on Facebook, the right one. Sabrina Mitchell, 27, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, warehouse coordinator at an Amazon fulfillment center on the south side of the city. Her profile was mostly private, a locked cover, a profile picture that showed her from a distance at what looked like a state park, a handful of visible posts, one from May about being nervous and excited. One from 3 weeks ago, a share of a recipe for chicken soup that she had captioned simply making this tonight. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that looked like someone planning a confrontation at a stranger's baby shower. She looked, from what little I could see, like a person who was tired and a little bit scared and trying to get through something hard, which, as it turned out, was exactly what she was. I opened a new message window. I sat with the blank text field for a moment, thinking about what to say. The wrong approach here would be accusatory. The wrong approach would be confrontational, or demanding, or anything that gave her a reason to close the conversation before it started. I needed her to talk to me. And to get her to talk to me, I needed her to understand that I was not her enemy. I typed, "This is Claire, from the baby shower. I'm not angry. I think someone did this to both of us. Would you be willing to talk?" I read it 3 times. Then I sent it. Then I put my phone face down on the table because Lily had told me to and because I knew she was right, and I ate approximately half the bag of cheese crackers while we talked about other things. About Lily's sister's new apartment in San Antonio. About the logistics company audit I had been neglecting. About whether the name we had chosen for the baby still felt right, which it did, but it is the kind of thing you need to say out loud occasionally just to confirm. 1 day passed, then 2. My phone produced no message from Sabrina Mitchell of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. On the 2nd day, Lily texted me a single instruction: drawer. I put the phone in the kitchen drawer and left it there for 4 hours, which was the longest 4 hours I had experienced in recent memory. On the evening of the 3rd day, my phone buzzed. Why would I talk to you? Not a question mark. Just the words, flat and wary. The punctuation of someone who is not sure they want an answer, but asked anyway. I picked it up. I typed back immediately because I had been composing this response in my head for 3 days and I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Because you said someone told me. Not him. Someone else. And I need to know who that was. I think you do too. I set the phone down. I watched it. 40 seconds later. Fine. Where? We agreed on a diner off 165, roughly equidistant between Nashville and Murfreesboro. I chose it for the neutral ground, the public setting, the easy parking. I will also tell you, because I promised to be honest, that I chose it because it was the closest sit-down restaurant to the highway, and at 32 weeks pregnant, bathroom access is not a preference. It is a non-negotiable strategic requirement. We set it for the following afternoon at 1 o'clock. I told Lily. She sent back a single response, "Go get her." I put my phone in my pocket, and I went to tell Marcus I had a lunch meeting tomorrow, which was technically accurate, and I went to bed, and I lay in the dark next to my husband, and I thought about a woman I had met for approximately 8 minutes at my baby shower, and what she might be able to tell me, and whether the something I was feeling, that particular hum in the back of my mind, that I have learned over 8 years to pay very close attention to whether that feeling was right. It usually is. Sabrina was already in the booth when I got there. She was sitting with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug, looking at the table in front of her with the focused, inward expression of someone who has been sitting with their own thoughts for long enough that they have stopped noticing the room around them. She had changed out of the white dress. She was wearing a gray sweatshirt and jeans, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked, this is the only word I have for it, smaller. Not physically smaller, just less. Like the version of her that had walked into my baby shower with her chin up and her phone out and her voice steady, had been running on a particular kind of fuel, and that fuel was gone now, and what was left was just a 27-year-old woman who was 7 months pregnant and very, very tired. She looked up when I slid into the booth across from her. Her expression did not warm exactly, but it shifted a slight recalibration, like she had been expecting someone and was now confirming that the someone had arrived. "You're bigger than I remembered," she said. I looked at her. "You're gonna lead with that?" Something moved across her face that was almost a smile. Almost. "Sorry, I'm not great at small talk right now." "Neither am I said. "So let's skip it." The waitress came. Sabrina ordered pancakes. I ordered eggs, toast, hash browns scattered and covered, and a large orange juice, because I was 32 weeks pregnant and had driven 40 minutes for this conversation, and I was going to eat a full meal. Sabrina watched me order with an expression that suggested she found this either impressive or alarming, possibly both. For the first 10 minutes, it was difficult. She sat with her arms crossed and her jaw set, and she answered my questions in the shortest sentences she could manage, and I understood it. I understood it completely. Because from where she was sitting, I was the wife. I was the official story, and the official story has a tendency to make the other version feel illegitimate, even when the other version is also a victim. So I did not push, I just asked her to show me the profile. She looked at me for a moment, then she uncrossed her arms, picked up her phone, and slid it across the sticky table toward me. Marcus P., that was the name on the profile. Not Marcus Donovan, just Marcus P., which was either a deliberate choice to maintain plausible deniability or a small oversight in an otherwise careful construction. The profile photo was Marcus My Marcus, unmistakably a photo I recognized from his old Facebook, taken at a friend's cookout 3 summers ago, him laughing at something off camera with a beer in his hand. But scrolling through, the photos became less consistent. A man at a rooftop bar downtown, similar build, similar coloring, but with something on his left arm. I enlarged the photo. There it was. An eagle tattoo, dark ink, spread across the left shoulder exactly as Sabrina had described it on Saturday. 2 different men. Someone had taken photos of my husband and photos of a stranger and woven them together into a single identity, carefully enough that if you were not looking for the inconsistency, you might not find it. I handed the phone back. "How long?" I asked. 6 months, she said. Almost exactly. She told me about it in pieces, not all at once, the way you tell a story that still hurts to touch. They had matched on a dating app. She had been using it cautiously, uncertainly, because she had recently ended a relationship and was not entirely sure she was ready, but was also lonely enough that cautious and uncertain felt like acceptable risks. Marcus P. had messaged her first. He had been attentive without being overwhelming, funny without trying too hard, interested in the details of her life in a way that felt genuine because, and this is the part that I kept coming back to later, kept turning over, it probably had been genuine at some level. Because someone had been on the other end of those messages, reading her responses, crafting replies designed to land exactly right. Someone had put in the work. The messages had been warm, patient, and consistent over 6 months. He had told her he was in a difficult marriage, that he felt trapped, that meeting her had reminded him what it felt like to actually connect with someone. He had sent her flowers once, a small bouquet from a grocery store, delivered to her apartment, and a stuffed bear for the baby that she still had, she said, looking at the table when she mentioned it. The ring on her left hand was one she had bought herself. He had told her, she said quietly, that he could not afford one yet. That as soon as he had sorted things out, as soon as he was free, he would do it properly. She had believed him. She had bought the ring herself and worn it because it made the whole thing feel more real. I sat with that for a moment. I sat with the specific cruelty of it, not just the lie, but the particular architecture of the lie, designed to find every soft place in a person and press on it gently until they let you in. "The ring," I said finally. "Where did you get it?" "Online. Amazon." She named the price without me asking, the way people do when they are slightly ashamed of something and have decided that getting it out first is easier than having it found out. $15. I nodded. I did not say anything about the ring. "Tell me about Kat," I said. Something changed in her face, a slight tightening, like the name itself had a texture she did not enjoy. She was in a Facebook group I joined when I found out I was pregnant, for single moms in Middle Tennessee. She paused. She was nice. Really nice. The kind of nice that makes you feel like someone is actually paying attention to you. "How long had you known her before she told you about the shower?" 4 months, maybe. A little more. She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug again. She commented on everything I posted, checked in when I was having a hard week. She felt like a friend. She said it carefully, the word friend, like she was aware of how it sounded now. "And then one day she sent me a private message," Sabrina continued. "She said she had seen something posted on Facebook, a baby shower announcement. She said the man hosting it, the husband, she said it was him. She said I deserved to know." She stopped. "She sent me the address and the time, and she said I deserved the truth." I picked up the napkin from under my silverware. I found a pen in my bag. I wrote the name carefully. Kat. Then I drew a circle around it. Then I drew another circle around that one. Sabrina's pancakes arrived. She looked at them without eating. My eggs arrived and I ate everything on the plate, because stress eating is a completely legitimate coping mechanism, and I have never once apologized for it. I drove home with a napkin in my cup holder and 4 letters I did not recognize yet, Kat. But that feeling, the one I only get when a set of numbers is about to tell me something I was not expecting, was already starting. Low and steady, like a frequency I had not tuned into yet but could feel beginning to rise. The Kat account was gone. Not deactivated, not private. Gone scrubbed clean with the kind of thoroughness that, in my professional experience, does not happen by accident. When someone deletes a social media presence that carefully, leaving no trace in any of the groups it was active in, no cached posts, no linked email that surfaces anywhere obvious, it means one of 2 things. Either they have done this before and they know exactly what they are doing, or they planned this particular exit before they even started. Neither option was reassuring. Lily spent the better part of 2 evenings on it. I want to be clear about what that means, because Lily's internet research capabilities are not casual. During her divorce 3 years ago, she located her ex-husband's new girlfriend's mother's Zillow listing in under 5 minutes, which she has always maintained was for purely informational purposes, and which I have always chosen to believe. She has found people who did not want to be found. She has located accounts that were buried under layers of privacy settings and alternate names. She is, in this specific and slightly alarming skill set, genuinely talented. The Kat account defeated her completely. She tried every variation she could construct. Kat, Kate, Katie, Catherine, Katrina, cross-referenced with the Facebook group for single mothers in Middle Tennessee, with the timeline of Sabrina's activity in that group, with every comment thread Sabrina had posted in during the months Kat had supposedly been active. Nothing. The account had been created, had served its purpose, and had been removed so cleanly it might as well have never existed. Like a line item that had been properly deleted from a ledger rather than just crossed out, no residue, no shadow, nothing to indicate it had ever been there. I told Lily on the 3rd evening that I thought we had hit a wall. She agreed, which is not something Lily does easily, and which told me more about the thoroughness of the dead end than anything else could have. We were sitting at my kitchen table with our laptops and the remnants of a dinner Marcus had left for us before retreating upstairs, and I was staring at a search results page that was telling me nothing useful for the 11th time, when Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway in his socks, holding a glass of water, looking at us with the expression of a man who wants to help and is not sure how. "There's something I've been thinking about," he said carefully. He uses that tone when he is about to say something he is not sure will be well received, which is a tone I have come to recognize and generally appreciate because it means he has thought about it first. "There's a woman at Castellano & Associates, the firm we partnered with on the Riverside Bridge project last year, a financial coordinator named Rhonda. She said something at a networking event in June that I thought it was nothing at the time. But she made a comment about my arms. Said something like, 'nice arms,' or 'you must work out.' One of those things that lands in that gray zone between friendly and not quite friendly." I looked at him. "I thought it was nothing," he said again. "I still think it's probably nothing. But you asked me to tell you if I remembered anything." I had asked him that. 3 days ago, in the car on the way home from the hospital, I had asked him to think about anyone who might have had access to his photos, anyone who might have had a reason, however small, to want to cause this kind of disruption. Lily was already typing. We spent the next 3 days on Rhonda. I will spare you the full account of those 3 days because they were, in the end, entirely unproductive, and there is a particular tedium to describing a dead end in detail. But I want to give you enough that you understand how thoroughly we pursued it, because I think that matters. We found her Facebook, her Instagram, her LinkedIn profile, and a Pinterest account that was primarily organized around farmhouse, kitchen aesthetics, and golden retriever content. She had been engaged to a civil engineer named Patrick for 8 months. She posted about Patrick frequently and with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. She had no visible connection to any single mothers groups in Middle Tennessee, no connection to Sabrina Mitchell, and no discernible motive to construct an elaborate catfishing operation targeting a forensic accountant and her structural engineer husband. She was, as far as every piece of available evidence indicated, a completely ordinary person who had made a mildly inappropriate comment at a networking event and then gone home and looked at farmhouse kitchen ideas on Pinterest. I told Lily on the 3rd day that we had wasted our time. She said, "At least I know 3 different ways to install shiplap now." I did not find this as comforting as she seemed to intend it. So that was where we were on Wednesday afternoon. No cat account, no Rhonda connection, no thread to pull. I had a napkin with a name on it and a feeling that was still there, still humming in the background, but nothing to connect it to, nothing to follow. Just the blank wall of a carefully executed disappearance and 3 days of misdirection that had led us nowhere. I left the office at 5:58. I drove to the parking structure on Commerce Street, where I had been parking since my firm moved buildings 2 years ago. I pulled into my usual spot on the 3rd level, the one near the elevator, because the walk matters more at 32 weeks than it did before. I turned off the engine. And then I sat there. I did not go upstairs. I did not call Marcus. I did not put the car back in gear and drive home. I just sat in the driver's seat of my Hyundai with the engine off and the windows up and the September heat pressing in from outside, and I looked at the concrete wall in front of me, and I let myself feel how tired I was. Not just physically tired, though I was that too. Tired in the particular way that comes from running at a problem from every direction you can think of and finding that every direction ends the same way. Tired in the way that starts to ask questions you do not want to answer. Questions like, what if this is the wall? What if there is nothing on the other side of it? What if the person who did this was simply careful enough and you are simply not going to find them? The automatic headlights came on at some point, responding to the dimming of the late afternoon light in the parking structure. Then they turned off again, their timer expired, having concluded that nobody in this vehicle was going anywhere. Even my car, it seemed, had given up on me. I sat there for 40 minutes. And somewhere in those 40 minutes, I built the argument in my head carefully, methodically, the way I build every argument for why stopping might be the reasonable choice. The argument I built went something like this. The baby was coming in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, give or take, and after that, nothing would be the way it had been before, which is something people say so often it has stopped meaning anything, but which I had been thinking about with increasing specificity in recent months. 6 weeks, until the most significant thing that had ever happened to me. And instead of folding onesies and finishing the nursery and doing the things that people do in the final weeks before a child arrives, I was sitting in a parking structure in downtown Nashville in a car that had given up on me, chasing a ghost that had been careful enough to leave nothing behind. My blood pressure was already a concern. Dr. Reeves had used the word concerning with precision and intent, and I had heard it the way I hear every carefully chosen word as exactly what it was. I was not supposed to be sitting in a hot car 40 minutes after leaving work, cataloging my failures. I was supposed to be elevating my feet and drinking water and eliminating unnecessary stress from my life, which was advice that had seemed almost satirically simple when she gave it, and now seemed like something from a foreign language. Patricia still had not said a word about Saturday. 2 weeks had passed, and my mother-in-law had called 4 times and asked about my iron levels and the baby's position and whether Marcus had finished assembling the crib, and she had said nothing. The neighborhood Facebook group had gone quiet after the administrator took down the post, but quiet is not the same as resolved, and I knew that. I knew that 14 people had said something in that thread that Lily had told me not to read, and I knew that those 14 people still lived within a mile of my house and still waved from their driveways on Sunday mornings. What if I just stopped? I let myself sit with that question, the way you sit with a number that might be wrong before you commit to flagging it. I turned it over. I examined it from the angles that were kind to it. Mature people, I told myself, know when to let things go. Mature people understand that some answers are not findable, and that pursuing them past a certain point is not determination, but stubbornness dressed up in determination's clothes. The baby mattered more than this. My health mattered more than this. Marcus knew the truth. I knew the truth. Did it matter whether anyone else ever did? I sat with that for a while. The parking structure had gotten quieter around me as the evening drew on. A car pulled in 2 spots to my left, a door opened and closed, footsteps moved toward the elevator. I watched the concrete wall in front of me, and I let myself seriously consider the possibility that stopping was the right thing to do. Then I picked up my phone and I called Lily. She answered on the second ring, which means she had been expecting my call, which means she knows me better than I sometimes give her credit for. I told her I was sitting in the parking structure. I told her I had been sitting there for 40 minutes. I told her about the argument I had built the baby, the blood pressure, the 6 weeks, the question of whether any of it was worth what it was costing me. I told her that I thought stopping might be the reasonable choice. I told her all of it without stopping, because once I started, I needed to get to the end of it, and Lily let me. She did not interrupt. She did not reassure me before I was finished. She just listened, quietly and completely, for as long as it took. When I was done, there was a brief silence. Then she said, "Claire, whoever built that profile knew exactly what they were doing. That is not a random act. That is not someone who was careless or impulsive. That is someone who spent months on this, months building a fake identity, months cultivating Sabrina, months waiting for the right moment to send her to exactly the right place. That level of planning does not come from nowhere. It comes from motive. Real, specific, personal motive." She paused. "And that person is absolutely 100% counting on you sitting in that parking lot right now." I sat with that sentence for about 15 seconds. It is a short sentence, as sentences go. 11 words in the part that mattered. And yet something about it, the specificity of it, the confidence of it, the way it reframed the question I had been asking from, should I stop, to what does stopping mean for the person who wants me to, something about it shifted things. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough. I said, "Okay." Lily said, "Okay?" "Okay," I said. "I'm going home. But I'm stopping at Dairy Queen first." "Obviously," she said. "Get the large." I got the large. Strawberry milkshake, large, from the Dairy Queen on Charlotte Pike, consumed mostly in the car with the windows down because the September evening had finally cooled to something manageable, and my daughter had decided that the cold sweetness of a milkshake was exactly what she had been waiting for, because she kicked appreciatively for the entire drive home. I chose to take this as encouragement. Marcus was in the kitchen when I got home, doing the dishes from dinner, and he looked at the Dairy Queen cup in my hand and said nothing about it, which is one of the many reasons I married him. I sat down at the kitchen table. I opened my laptop. I went to the shared drive where I had been keeping notes, and I opened a new document, and I typed at the top of it, "Start over." Then I went to the printer and I opened Sabrina's forwarded messages. All of them, the complete 6-month record she had sent me after our meeting, 219 messages in total, and I sent them to print. All of them. Every page. The printer ran for 11 minutes. I watched it the entire time. When it was done, I had a stack of paper approximately 1.5 inches thick. I carried it to the kitchen table. I found a yellow highlighter in the drawer where we keep things that do not have a better home. I sat down across from my stack of 219 pages, and I looked at it, and I thought about what Lily had said. Months of planning. Real, specific, personal motive. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I was a forensic accountant. Finding the one number that did not belong in 219 pages of data was, technically speaking, my job. I picked up the highlighter. I turned to page 1. I was not looking for what Marcus P. had said. I already knew what he had said. I had read enough of the messages to understand the shape of the manipulation, the warmth of it, the patience of it. What I was looking for was how he had said it. The specific words, the particular constructions, the phrases that belonged to a real person's real vocabulary and would therefore appear somewhere else, in some other context, if I knew where to look. Because people cannot help sounding like themselves. It is one of the things I have learned in 8 years of forensic work. You can change the numbers, you can move the money, you can construct elaborate alternative explanations for what the records appear to show. But somewhere, in some document, in some email, in some memo that was never meant to be examined, the person behind the fraud sounds exactly like themselves. And that is where you find them. I turn to page 2. I want to be honest about something before I tell you what happened next. I am 32 years old. I have a graduate degree in accounting and 8 years of professional experience finding things in documents that other people have tried to hide. I own exactly one highlighter yellow medium tip purchased from the Target on Charlotte Pike approximately 14 months ago and somehow still functional, and I use it the way other people use a scalpel. With intention and without waste. What I did that night was not glamorous. There was no music. There was no dramatic montage of papers being pinned to walls with red string connecting them. It was just me, at my kitchen table, in the clothes I had worn to work, with a cup of decaf that went cold before I finished it, turning pages one at a time, in the kind of focused silence that Marcus has learned over 3 years of marriage to recognize as do not come in here and ask if I want anything. He did not come in. He is a good man. I was not reading the messages for content. I had already read them for content in the days after Sabrina forwarded them to me, and I had understood what they said. What I was reading for now was something different. I was reading for the texture of the language, the specific words chosen when other words were available, the sentence structures that came up again and again, the phrases that belonged to a particular person's particular way of moving through the English language. Because here's what I know about language. From 8 years of reading documents and depositions and financial narratives written by people who were trying to sound like someone else, you can change a lot of things, but you cannot entirely change how you think. Your vocabulary is yours. The way you construct a sentence is yours. The particular phrases you reach for when you are trying to express a specific kind of empathy or warmth or understanding, those are yours, and they follow you everywhere. Even into a fake identity you built on someone else's photographs. Page 1, page 2, page 3. I worked slowly, methodically, the way I work through any document. I was not looking for a specific phrase. I did not know what I was looking for. I was looking for the thing that would make me stop, the way a particular entry in a ledger makes you stop, not because you can immediately identify what is wrong with it, but because something in your trained eye says, this one. Look at this one. Pages 4 through 10 passed without it. Page 11. Message 67. Sabrina had written about an argument with her mother. A long, emotional message about feeling unseen and misunderstood, about the particular loneliness of being pregnant without a partner and having a mother who responded to that loneliness with advice instead of acknowledgement. It was the kind of message that is hard to read, not because it is dramatic, but because it is specific and real in the way that real pain always is. The response from Marcus P. read, "That sounds really heavy. I hear you. Let's sit with that for a moment before we try to figure out what to do about it." I stopped. I read it again. Let's sit with that. I put the highlighter down. I picked it back up. I highlighted the phrase slowly, and then I sat back in my chair and I looked at it. It was 3 words. Completely ordinary. The kind of thing 1,000 people say in 1,000 conversations every day. Therapeutic language. The sort of phrase that has migrated from actual therapy into general usage over the past decade, the way certain words do when they become useful enough that everyone starts borrowing them. There was nothing distinctive about it on its face. Nothing that should have made me stop. And yet, there is a thing that happens in forensic work. I have tried to explain it to people who do not do this kind of work, and I have never found quite the right words for it. A thing where a piece of information lands differently than the information around it. Not louder, not more visible, just different. Off by some fraction of a degree, the way a number is off when it has been adjusted rather than calculated. You cannot always say immediately why. You just know that this one needs a second look. Let's sit with that needed a second look. I could not place it. I sat with it, which felt, under the circumstances, like an irony the universe had constructed specifically for me for the better part of an hour. I continued reading. Pages 12 through 22 produced nothing else that made me stop. By 11:45, I had read through page 31, and my decaf was cold and my lower back was making the particular complaint that it has been making with increasing insistence since about week 28. I went to bed. Marcus was already asleep, doing the even, unhurried breathing of a man whose conscience is clear and whose sinuses are not. I lay on my side with a pillow between my knees, which is not comfortable but is the least uncomfortable of the available options at 32 weeks, and I looked at the ceiling. Let's sit with that. I turned it over. I held it up to the light of whatever part of the brain handles this kind of thing at midnight. I tried to find where I had heard it before, or read it before, or seen it written down somewhere in a context that was not a text message between a pregnant woman in Murfreesboro and a fake version of my husband. I could not find it. I fell asleep without finding it, which is the most frustrating way to fall asleep. At 2:15 in the morning, I woke up. Not gradually. All at once, the way you wake up when something has finished processing while you slept and is now presenting you with results. I lay still for a moment in the dark. Marcus breathed beside me. My daughter shifted, a slow, rolling movement that had become familiar over the past weeks. The particular movement that means she is repositioning rather than protesting. I got up, I went to the kitchen. I did not turn on the overhead light because it is too bright at 2 in the morning, and I have learned this the hard way. I turned on the light above the stove, which is enough to see by without being unkind. I opened my laptop. I was not going back to the messages. I had read the messages, and the messages had given me what they were going to give me for now. What I was going to do instead was look at photographs. Specifically, I was going to look at Marcus's old photographs. Not because I thought I would find the phrase there, but because I had been thinking, in the slow background processing of sleep, about motive, about who might have had reason enough to do something like this, about the women from Marcus's past, if there were any, who might have carried something forward from whatever they had shared with him into something that looked like this. I opened his Facebook profile. I scrolled back past our wedding, past our first apartment, past the years when we were first together, back to college, back to the tailgates and the house parties and the bowling alley that I was fairly certain no longer existed, and in 4 photographs spread across 2 different years, 3 different events, I found her. The same woman, different photos, different backgrounds, different groups of people surrounding her, but the same face every time, standing near Marcus, not always next to him, sometimes a few people away, but oriented toward him in the particular way that a person orients toward someone they are paying close attention to and hoping will pay attention back. I looked at her for a long time. Then I went to wake up Marcus. I want to be honest with you about something. I enjoyed building that evidence package. I am not entirely proud of how much I enjoyed it. Actually, no, I take that back. I am completely proud. I spent 8 years learning how to find financial fraud in documents that were specifically constructed to prevent me from finding it. I have sat across from people who lied to my face with considerable sophistication, and I have taken those lies apart piece by piece until the truth underneath them was undeniable. Dana Whitfield had spent 8 months constructing something she believed was untraceable. What she had not accounted for was that untraceable, to a forensic accountant, is not a destination. It is a challenge. Lily came over on a Thursday evening with her laptop and 2 bags of Takis, because Lily understands that serious work requires appropriate provisions. We set up at the kitchen table. Marcus made dinner, left plates for us, and retreated to the living room without being asked, because by this point in the process, he had developed an accurate read of the situation and the wisdom to act accordingly. We started with what I was calling Item 1. Item 1 was a side-by-side comparison document. On the left side, screenshots of the Marcus P. profile, the profile photo, the secondary photos, the account details, the timestamps showing when each image had been posted. On the right side, the original sources, Marcus's actual Facebook and Instagram, the real posts, the real dates. Every photograph that Dana had used to build the fake profile had been taken from my husband's actual accounts, and I could prove it because the original posts were still there, time-stamped, unaltered, predating the fake profile's use of them by months in some cases and years in others. Whoever said that people who steal other people's identities are sophisticated had clearly never met a forensic accountant with a color-coded comparison document and a very fast internet connection. Item 2 took more time. It was Sabrina's written statement, and I could not write it for her. It had to be hers, in her words, describing her own experience. I called her on a Thursday morning and explained what I needed. There was a silence on the other end of the line that lasted long enough that I thought she might say no. Then she said, "How long does it need to be?" "As long as it needs to be," I said. "Just the truth. In order, from the beginning." She sent it 4 days later. 4 pages, handwritten first and then typed, describing the 6 months of messages, the promises, the ring she had bought herself, and critically the moment Kat had messaged her privately to tell her about the baby shower. She described what Kat had said, how Kat had framed it, how Kat had positioned herself as someone trying to help, rather than someone trying to weaponize a vulnerable woman's pain. She signed it at the bottom in handwriting that was careful and deliberate, the handwriting of someone who understood the weight of what they were putting their name on. I read it twice before I filed it. The second time was harder than the first. Item 3 was the Facebook group evidence. This was the piece I found most satisfying to construct, in the specific way that a forensic accountant finds satisfaction in a well-organized chronological record that tells its own story without requiring interpretation. I had screenshots of every comment the Cat account had made on Sabrina's posts in the Single Mothers group, organized by date from late February through the week before the baby shower, laid out in sequence. It read exactly like what it was, a deliberate, patient campaign, a person identifying a target, investing in her trust over months, and then activating that trust at precisely the right moment. I labeled each screenshot with the date, the post it was responding to, and a one-line note about its function in the overall pattern. Comment 1 through 4, establishing presence and warmth. Comments 5 through 12, deepening trust, sharing apparent personal vulnerabilities to encourage reciprocal openness. Comments 13 through 19, reinforcing Sabrina's sense of being wronged, gently escalating the narrative toward confrontation. Final private message, the activation, the address, the time. It was, I noted in my documentation, textbook manipulation, the kind of thing that gets written about in psychology papers. The kind of thing that is genuinely difficult to execute because it requires patience and consistency over a long period of time, and most people who want to hurt someone want to do it faster than this. Dana had been willing to wait. That told me something about how much this had mattered to her. It also told me something about how much she had underestimated me. Robert Keene came into the picture on a Saturday morning. He is a family friend of Marcus's parents, an attorney who has practiced in Nashville for 30 years and who agreed to meet with us at his office on a Saturday because Marcus called him and explained the situation, and Robert apparently found it sufficiently interesting to rearrange his weekend. He charged us $250 for 2 hours, which he told us at the end of the meeting was the most entertaining brief he had prepared in recent memory, and which I chose to take as a compliment. What Robert provided was something I could not provide for myself: the cover letter. The document that would accompany the evidence package to Pinnacle Wealth Management, written in the specific language of legal correspondence, which says what it says in a voice so measured and so precise that the reader understands the full weight of it without the writer ever having to raise their voice. The letter did not accuse Dana of anything, technically. It brought to the attention of the firm's managing partners that certain conduct by one of their senior analysts appeared to involve the use of professional skills and digital platforms in ways that raised concerns about judgment, fitness. It suggested that the firm might wish to review the matter internally at their discretion, and noted that the accompanying documentation was available for their review. Legal language is remarkable. It can say everything while technically saying very little. Robert had spent 30 years learning exactly how much weight a sentence could carry before it became something other than a letter. He handed us the finished draft across his desk, and Lily read it, and then she looked at me over the top of the page and said, in Spanish, something that I will not repeat here, but that conveyed a level of appreciation I found deeply gratifying. I thanked Robert. I told him we had 3 more items to build before the package would be complete. He said to call him when we were ready, and he showed us out. And I stood on the sidewalk outside his office in the October morning, and I thought about the 3 envelopes I was going to send and what was going to happen when they arrived. We still had work to do, but we were getting there. Item 4 was my favorite. I say that knowing it is a slightly alarming thing to say about a piece of evidence in a harassment case. But I am a forensic accountant, and forensic accountants have a particular relationship with the moment when a pattern becomes undeniable, when the thing you suspected turns out to be provable, when the intuition that has been running quietly in the background of your professional brain gets validated by something concrete and documentable. That moment has a specific quality to it. A kind of clean, precise satisfaction that I have never found an adequate word for in English, though I suspect other languages have one. Item 4 was the verbal fingerprint. On the left side of the document, a screenshot of message 67 from the Marcus P. conversation with Sabrina, dated the 14th of April. The relevant line highlighted in yellow. Let's sit with that for a moment before we try to figure out what to do about it. On the right side, a screenshot of Dana Whitfield's Instagram post from the 28th of March, 17 days earlier. The relevant portion of the caption highlighted in the same yellow, sometimes healing means learning to sit with the discomfort instead of rushing past it. Same phrase, same construction. Same person's voice in 2 different places, separated by 17 days and the boundary between a real identity and a stolen one. Was it proof beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law? Probably not on its own. Language is not fingerprint evidence. Phrases migrate. People borrow from each other. A competent defense attorney could make that argument, and they would not be entirely wrong. But I was not building a case for a court of law. I was building a case for the people who employed Dana Whitfield, and for the people who had raised her, and for the 431 members of my neighborhood Facebook group who had watched someone post a vague, damaging question about my family and had drawn their own conclusions. For those audiences, the verbal fingerprint was exactly what it needed to be. It was the piece that made the whole picture click into focus. The piece that took everything circumstantial and made it feel, in the way that matters to human beings who are not judges, undeniable. Item 5 was more straightforward. Sabrina had kept everything she is, as it turns out, a thorough and organized person, which I appreciated in the circumstances. Among the things she had kept was a notification screenshot from early in her relationship with Marcus P., in which the platform had displayed the account email address in a way that was visible in the image. She had not known at the time that this was significant. She had screenshotted it because she screenshotted things, the way many people do, without particular intention. The email address began with the letters D and W, followed by a string of numbers. Dana Whitfield, DW. It was not conclusive, but combined with everything else, it was the kind of detail that removes the last remaining doubt from a reasonable person's mind. I also found, with some assistance from Sabrina, the Amazon order confirmation for the ring. Sabrina had forwarded it to herself from the email address Marcus P. had used for their communications. He had apparently sent her a link to the listing at some point, as a placeholder for the real ring he had promised, and the seller information on the listing, cross-referenced with the order history Sabrina still had access to, pointed to a delivery address on the south side of Nashville. I will not say it was Dana's address in this document, because I cannot prove it was Dana's address in a way that would satisfy a legal standard. But I noted it, and I included the documentation, and I let the people reading the file draw their own conclusions. Item 6 was the piece that made this more than a personal matter. 8 months before my baby shower, I had been assigned to review a set of quarterly financial reports as part of a routine audit of a client's vendor relationships. The reports had been prepared by Pinnacle Wealth Management on behalf of Castellano and Associates. They had contained a series of revenue recognition irregularities, not dramatic, not the kind of thing that announces itself, but the kind of careful, consistent pattern that a trained eye finds and a careless eye misses. I had flagged them. I had documented them. I had submitted my findings through the standard process, which meant they went to my supervisor and from there to the client, who had taken the matter up with Pinnacle. The reports bore the signature of Pinnacle's senior financial analyst, Dana Whitfield. I included the relevant pages from my original audit documentation, redacted where necessary to protect client confidentiality, but sufficient to establish the connection clearly. I included the date of my submission. I included the correspondence that followed, which showed the timeline of the matter and when Dana would have known that the flag had come from an outside auditor. The outside auditor whose husband she had been targeting. 3 envelopes. That was what all of it added up to. 3 manila envelopes from a pack I bought at the office supply store on West End Avenue, into each of which I placed a complete copy of the evidence package along with an appropriate cover document. Envelope 1 went to the managing partners at Pinnacle Wealth Management with Robert Keene's cover letter. Envelope 2 went to Dana's parents at their home address in Brentwood, Tennessee, which I found without significant difficulty because her mother maintained an active and public Facebook presence that included her street address in a post about a neighborhood garage sale from 2 summers ago. I included a brief personal note. I kept it factual. I said only that I thought they should know what had been done and that I hoped they could help their daughter understand the seriousness of it. Envelope 3 was my Facebook post. 7 paragraphs. No names except my own and Marcus's. No accusations, no drama, no call to action beyond the implicit one contained in the facts themselves. I described what had happened at the baby shower. I explained that the woman who had appeared was herself a victim of catfishing. I stated that the person responsible had been identified and that appropriate steps had been taken. I ended with, "Marcus and I are fine. The baby is fine." And the truth has a way of surfacing, even when someone has worked very hard to keep it submerged. I posted it on a Tuesday morning at 7:45. Then I closed the laptop. I opened my work email. I opened the audit file for the logistics company that had been waiting patiently for my attention for 3 weeks. I found my place in the revenue reconciliation and I kept going, because life continues regardless of what else is happening in it, and balance sheets do not reconcile themselves. The dominoes, I figured, would fall on their own schedule. The thing about sending 3 envelopes on a Tuesday morning is that by Friday you have almost managed to convince yourself that nothing is going to happen. That the careful, methodical work of the past 2 weeks will turn out to have been an elaborate exercise in talking to yourself. That the dominoes you set up will simply stand there indefinitely because the universe does not actually organize itself around the effort you put into things. And then they all fall at once. Lily called me on Friday afternoon at 4:17 while I was in the middle of a phone call with a client, which I ended as quickly as professionally possible because Lily does not call in the middle of a workday unless something has happened. I stepped into the hallway outside my office and called her back. "Dana Whitfield had a meeting at Pinnacle this morning," Lily said, without preamble, because Lily understands that preamble is for people who have time for it. I have a contact who works in their building. She texted me an hour ago. Dana was called into the managing partner's office at 10. She was in there for 40 minutes. She left the building at 10:55 and did not come back. I leaned against the hallway wall. "How does your contact know she didn't come back?" I asked. "Because her badge was deactivated at 11:03, Lily said. "My contact works in building security." I thought about that for a moment. A badge deactivated at 11:03 on a Friday morning. Dana Whitfield, senior financial analyst, had walked into a meeting with the managing partners of Pinnacle Wealth Management at 10 o'clock and had walked out 55 minutes later without a functioning access badge. In the corporate world, that is not a conversation. That is a conclusion. By the following Wednesday, it was confirmed. Lily's contact reported that Dana's desk had been cleared. Her name had been removed from the firm's internal directory. A brief, bloodless statement from Pinnacle's HR department, which somehow found its way to Lily through channels I have learned not to ask about, referenced conduct inconsistent with the firm's professional standards and conflict of interest policies. It did not go into detail. It did not need to. A digital marketing professional, I had once read, is only as valuable as their reputation for judgment. A financial analyst, it turned out, operated on a similar principle. Dana had used the skills her employer paid her for research, digital platforms, the construction of convincing narratives from available information to conduct a months-long harassment campaign against a private citizen. The managing partners of Pinnacle Wealth Management, upon reviewing the documentation I had provided, had apparently concluded that this represented what one of them, according to Lily's contact, described as a catastrophic liability risk. I found that phrase deeply satisfying. Catastrophic liability risk. I wrote it in the margin of the notepad on my desk and looked at it for a moment before turning the page. LinkedIn went first. Dana's profile, which had listed her position at Pinnacle and her 8 years of progressive experience in financial analysis, disappeared sometime between Wednesday evening and Thursday morning. Then Instagram, 3,100 followers, gone. The brunch photographs and the Radnor Lake sunsets and the motivational captions in clean serif font, all of it, gone. The account that had taken considerable effort to curate and considerable patience to maintain had been removed, with what I imagined was considerably less effort and considerably more urgency. The Mazda content era, as Lily put it, was over. My Facebook post had been doing its own quiet work in the meantime. By Wednesday morning, it had 312 reactions and 114 comments, which for a post by a private person about a private matter is, I am told, significant. I read some of the comments. Most of them were from women I knew, or women who knew women I knew, or women who did not know me at all, but who had shared the post because something in it had landed for them in a way they wanted to pass on. A handful of the comments were from men, which surprised me, and then, on reflection, did not. The neighborhood Facebook group had a new thread by Thursday. Someone I did not know had posted. Did anyone read Claire Donovan's update? The comments beneath it were different from the 14 comments I had not read 2 weeks ago. These ones, Lily told me, I could look at. I did. They were the kind of comments that made the previous thread feel like it had happened in a different world. Dana's mother called Patricia on a Thursday evening. I know this because Patricia told me later, in the careful, measured way that Patricia tells me things she has thought about before saying. Colleen Whitfield, who attended a church in Brentwood and who had posted about her daughter's professional achievements with the particular pride of a parent who has invested enormously in a child's success, called Patricia and cried. She cried because she was embarrassed. She cried because she did not understand. She cried because the daughter she had been publicly celebrating had done something she could not publicly defend, and there is a specific kind of grief that comes with that realization, and it does not resolve quickly. Patricia listened. She said very little, which is, in its own way, a form of grace. Sabrina texted me on a Friday evening. Not a long message. Just, I heard what happened. I'm glad. And then, after a pause of about 3 minutes, thank you for not making me the villain in this. I read that twice. Then I typed back, you were never the villain. You were the part of the story that made me understand what was actually happening. And I meant it. Every word of it, in a way that surprised me a little with its completeness. And then, on Saturday morning, at 9 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, 34 weeks pregnant, in the specific kind of Saturday morning outfit that consists of whatever was closest to the bed when I woke up. Marcus was still asleep. I went to the door and opened it, and found Patricia standing on my front porch. No call ahead. No text. Just Patricia, in what I recognized as her good coat, the navy one, she reserves for occasions she has decided matter, holding a white envelope with my name written on the front in her small, neat handwriting. She held it out toward me. I'd like you to read this when you're ready, she said. Not now, when you're ready. She did not wait for me to respond. She turned, walked back down the porch steps, got into her champagne Buick, and sat in my driveway for a full minute before pulling away. I stood in the doorway and watched her go. I think she was crying. I could not be certain from that distance. I gave her the uncertainty. It felt like the right thing to do. I closed the door. I stood in my hallway holding a white envelope with my name on it, and I thought about how much had happened since a helium tank defeated me on a Saturday morning in September, and how much was still left to understand. I read it that night, after dinner, after Marcus had fallen asleep in front of the television and I had turned it off and sat for a while in the quiet of the living room with the envelope in my lap. Patricia's handwriting is small and precise, the kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who spent decades writing lesson plans and progress reports and formal correspondence, someone for whom the act of putting words on paper has always carried a certain weight. It took me a moment to adjust to the size of it, to slow my eyes down to the pace the letters required. Once I did, I read without stopping. The letter was 2 pages. The first page was about the baby, about how much she was looking forward to meeting her granddaughter, about the nursery color she thought might work well with the light in our spare room, about a blanket she had been knitting in secret for 3 months and was nearly finished with. It was warm and practical and entirely Patricia, and I read it with the particular feeling of someone receiving a gift they had not known they needed. The second page was different. It began, "I have been trying to find the right words for this since September, and I am not certain I have found them yet. But I am going to try anyway, because some things need to be said, even when the saying of them is imperfect." She wrote about the baby shower. She wrote about standing in that room when Sabrina walked in, about watching the confrontation unfold, about the moment Claire had asked her question and Marcus had pulled back his sleeve. She wrote about the 3 seconds she called them 3 seconds, which told me she had counted them too, or that she had replayed the moment enough times to know their duration, during which she had felt something she described, with characteristic precision, as a question I had no right to ask forming itself in my mind before I could stop it. She wrote, "I froze. My son's wife was standing in the middle of her own baby shower being publicly accused of something that was not true, and I stood there and I waited to see what would happen instead of being the first person to speak. I should have been the first person to speak. I knew Marcus. I have known Marcus his entire life. I knew what his character was, and I knew what that moment required of me, and I did not do it. I have to live with that, and I am going to. And I am not asking you to make it easier for me. I am only asking you to let me say it clearly so that it exists between us as something that has been named." She wrote, "I am asking for your forgiveness, not because I believe I have earned it, and not because I expect it immediately or completely, but because I do not want my granddaughter to grow up in a family where the people who love her are too proud to say plainly when they have gotten something wrong. She deserves better than that from all of us. I think you deserve better than that from me specifically." The letter ended with a sentence about the nursery curtains. She had seen some at a shop in Green Hills that she thought might work, and she wondered if Claire might want to look at them together sometime, if she was feeling up to it. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time. Marcus came in from the kitchen at some point, where he had gone to get a glass of water, and he saw me on the couch and stopped in the doorway. He looked at the letter, and then at my face, and then back at the letter, with the expression of a man who is making a rapid and careful assessment of the situation. "What does it say?" he asked quietly. "Your mom wants to help pick out the nursery curtains," I said. He looked at me. "We have curtains. We're getting new ones." He stood in the doorway for a moment longer. Then he said, "Okay," in the tone of a man who understands that this conversation is finished and that he has understood everything he needs to understand from it. He went back to the kitchen. I heard him fill his glass, heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard the particular creak of the 3rd step that we have been meaning to fix for 2 years. I folded the letter carefully along its original creases and put it back in the envelope. I held it for a moment, then I set it on the coffee table and went to find my laptop. I had been putting off an email for 3 weeks. The email was to Alan Garrett, the chief financial officer of my firm, regarding the ongoing miscalculation of my maternity leave benefits. I had been sending the same inquiry to HR every 4 days for 3 weeks, and HR had been responding with variations of the same non-answer, and I had been accepting those non-answers because I had been occupied with other things, and because I had been operating under the assumption that the system would eventually correct itself if I kept applying pressure to the correct channel. The correct channel, it turned out, was not HR. I wrote Alan a brief, clear email. I attached the relevant pay stubs, the original benefits calculation, the correct calculation, and a 1-paragraph explanation of the discrepancy. I sent it at 10:47 on a Saturday night and then closed the laptop and went to bed. Alan responded at 8:15 on Monday morning. He had forwarded my email to the head of HR and the payroll manager simultaneously, with a 3-sentence note that I was not copied on but that Lily's friend in our HR department later described to me as extremely direct. The correction appeared in the payroll system by Monday afternoon. The retroactive adjustment was processed by Friday. The difference, applied to the previous 3 weeks of miscalculation, arrived in my account the following Tuesday. 3 weeks of emails to the wrong person. 1 email to the right one. I thought about that. I thought about Pinnacle Wealth Management, and about the 14 comments I never read, and about the HR department that had been reviewing my situation for 22 days without resolving it. I thought about how often the problem is not the problem itself, but the place you are directing your energy when you try to address it. And I thought that this was either a very coherent life lesson or a very convenient coincidence, and that I was going to choose to believe it was the former. My 34-week appointment was on a Thursday. Dr. Reeves wrapped the cuff around my arm and watched the dial with her usual focused attention, and then looked at me over her glasses. 116/74, she said. She made a note on her tablet. Then she looked at me again, with the expression of a woman who has seen 3,000 cases and is occasionally surprised by one. "What changed?" she asked. "I eliminated the variable," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Then the severity of her expression reduced itself by approximately 10%, which for Dr. Reeves constitutes something very close to a smile. Sabrina texted me 3 days after that appointment. Just a photograph, small and grainy and unmistakably a human being in the earliest, most potato-like stage of external existence. Underneath it, 4 words: "She is here, June." I saved it immediately. I looked at it for a long time. And I thought about 2 women who had never meant to know each other, connected by the specific cruelty of someone who had decided that other people's lives were available to be used. And I thought that June was a very good name, solid and clear and unpretentious, the kind of name that belongs to someone who is going to be fine. I hoped she would be fine. I was fairly certain she would. My daughter was born on a Thursday. 6 pounds, 14 ounces. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a very strong opinion about being placed anywhere other than exactly where she wanted to be, which turned out to be a personality trait that arrived fully formed and has not moderated in the slightest in the weeks since. She came into the world at 6:22 in the morning, before the sun was fully up, in a room that smelled like antiseptic and looked like every hospital room looks, and felt like the most significant place I had ever been in my life. Marcus held my hand through the whole thing and cried twice, which he will deny if you ask him, and which I am telling you anyway, because it is one of my favorite things that has ever happened. Patricia was in the waiting room. She had arrived at 4 in the morning when Marcus had called her, and she had been there for 2 hours and 22 minutes by the time the nurse brought our daughter out to show her. I was not in the room when it happened. I was still being attended to, being put back together in the various ways that require attention after a baby arrives, but Marcus told me about it later. He said his mother took the baby in her arms and stood very still for a moment, the way she stands when she is trying not to show something, and then she stopped trying and she cried. The open kind of crying, the kind that Patricia Donovan does not do in front of people, the kind that means something has gotten past every careful defense she has spent a lifetime constructing. I am glad Marcus told me. I think about it often. Lily arrived at 8:30 with coffee for Marcus, a breakfast sandwich for me, and her camera, because Lily had decided before the baby was even born that this event was going to be documented properly, which meant photographing everything: the room, the equipment, the nurses, the view from the window, the specific way the morning light came through the blinds. She photographed my breakfast sandwich. She photographed Marcus's shoes. She photographed Patricia holding the baby from 4 different angles. She is going to put together an album, she told me, and I believe her completely, because Lily does not make statements about future projects she does not intend to complete. I lay in that hospital bed in the hours after my daughter arrived, and I thought about things. This is, I have found, what you do in the hours after a baby arrives. You lie there, and the world rearranges itself around you, and you think. I thought about Sabrina, in a diner off I-65, sliding her phone across a sticky table. I thought about June, 6 pounds something, healthy, with a mother who had been through something terrible and had come out of it knowing exactly how strong she was. I thought about 2 babies born within weeks of each other, both of them connected. In a way, neither of them would ever know or need to know, by someone else's cruelty and their mother's refusal to be undone by it. I thought about the question. The one question I had asked, in the middle of my own baby shower, with 47 people watching and my blood pressure doing things my doctor would not have approved of, and my daughter expressing her opinions from the inside with considerable force. One question aimed at the one detail that the whole false structure depended on, the number that did not belong. People have asked me, since I posted about what happened, whether I planned that moment, whether I had thought it through in advance, whether I had known what I was going to ask before I walked towards Sabrina across that deck. The honest answer is no. I did not plan it. I did not have time to plan it. What I had was 8 years of training that taught me to look for the thing that does not add up, and a husband I knew well enough to know what was not on his arms, and the particular stillness that descends on me when I am too focused to panic. That stillness is not bravery. I want to be clear about that. Bravery is when you are afraid and you act anyway. What I had was something different, a kind of narrowing, a reduction of everything in the room to the single question that mattered. I do not take credit for it as a character trait. I take credit for it as a skill, built slowly over years, that happened to be exactly what that moment required. But here is the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that feels most true when I sit with the whole of it. The question about the tattoo was not what won, it was what started it. What actually won was every step that came after the 3 days waiting for Sabrina to respond, the diner off I-65, the 219 pages printed and highlighted at midnight, the 40 minutes in a parking structure when I almost stopped. What won was Lily showing up with provisions. What won was Sabrina sliding her phone across a sticky table even though she had every reason not to trust me. What won was Patricia sitting in my driveway for a full minute before she found the courage to drive away and then finding it. What won was not letting someone else write the end of my story. I think about that a lot now in the particular way you think about things when you have a new person in your life who is going to need you to have figured some of them out. You cannot always control what happens to you. You cannot always prevent someone from walking into your baby shower with bad intentions and a borrowed face. But you can control what you do next. You can choose not to sit in the parking lot. You can choose to go back to page 1. You can choose to ask the one question that matters instead of making noise around all the questions that don't. And you can choose, when the person who stood like a statue in your moment of need shows up at your door in her good coat with a letter in her hand, to read it when you're ready. I named my daughter Eleanor. We call her Ellie. She has Marcus's nose and my tendency to express strong preferences at inconvenient times, and Patricia's eyes, which are the gray-green of a lake on a cloudy morning, and which I have been told by everyone who has seen her will probably change, but which I privately hope do not. She is, as of this telling, 5 weeks old. She does not sleep for more than 3 hours at a stretch, which is an experience I was warned about extensively and still was not prepared for. She has a very specific cry she uses for hunger that is different from the one she uses for everything else, and I learned to tell them apart in about 48 hours, which Marcus regards as something close to a superpower and which I regard as basic pattern recognition. I am on maternity leave. My benefits were calculated correctly, the balance sheet reconciled. The last normal moment before all of this was me standing on a deck in September, arguing with a helium tank at 9 in the morning. The helium tank won that argument. I want you to know that. I am not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of a cleaner ending. But everything else, the thing that mattered, the things worth winning, those I won. And if your story is anything like mine, I think you can too. If this one landed with you, tell me in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me what you would have done differently, because I genuinely want to know, and because some of your answers are going to be better than mine. And if you have a story that needs telling, drop it below because I read every single one. Click the next one. It is already waiting for you.